This episode of She Shields America is proudly brought to you by Nephron Nitrile and Shield Manufacturing, leaders in innovation and quality within the PPE industry. Together, they're on a mission to bring manufacturing back to America, ensuring the highest standards for protective equipment that keeps our communities safe. When it comes to protecting those who protect us, Nephron Nitrile and Shield Manufacturing have you covered. Now let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome back to She Shields America, the podcast where we champion the movement to bring PPE manufacturing back to the United States. Because we're firm believers that protecting our frontline heroes starts with protecting our supply chain. I'm Andrea Abbott, and today we are tackling a crisis that is hiding in plain sight: medical waste. From overflowing landfills to skyrocketing costs, the healthcare industry is drowning in medical waste. But what if I told you that onshoring manufacturing isn't just strengthening our economy, it's also a game changer for sustainability? Today I have Alison Bagwell with me, and she is an expert in microbiology as well as biomedical engineering. We want to get her opinion on how she feels about medical waste, as well as some insight on some of the case studies that she has published herself. How are you doing today, Allison?
Doing great, Andrea. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to have you back.
I'm glad to be here.
The topic today is environmental impact for domestic PPE manufacturing. I've been doing some research and I found a case study that was published by the Royal Society of Medicine, and they analyzed the environmental impact of PPE used in England during the first 6 months of COVID. So what they found was manufacturing reduced the carbon footprint by 12%, and that reduction was found to be attributed by the elimination of overseas transportation, as well as the use of domestic energy sources. So how do you feel about that and some of the case studies that you've published yourself? Can you put some insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, not only we start back on, you started with COVID, so we'll pick on COVID for a minute. One of the things that I think that was really interesting that we found was our own U.S. stockpile. For instance, 3/4 of our U.S. stockpile that we had was expired product. So, all of that had to be thrown out because, I think what people didn't really understand is that all medical devices have a shelf life, and polypropylene, which is the primary polymer used in most of our non-woven materials, and natural butadiene rubber, didn't mean to say that, nitrile butadiene rubber is, our MBR, our nitrile products, and it has a shelf life too. So, one thing that we failed to recognize is that we needed to observe first in, first out principles when we actually have a stockpile, so that we're making sure that the oldest inventory that is in the stockpile is actually being utilized. And that wasn't actually recognized until it was too late. And we had actually this event and then had to throw out 3/4 of it, which went straight to the landfill, right? And so you think to yourself, well, we could incinerate some of it, but now with a petrochemical like nitrile, incinerating just adds, more carbon emissions, more VOCs into the environment. So that wasn't actually a good idea either. So when you look at being able to manufacture in the United States versus getting something overseas, um, you actually can apply principles like just-in-time manufacturing. You don't have to sit there and run a stockpile like you would because you're reliant on another country to actually supply it with you, or for you, I should say. And on the other side of that, you have shorter shipping, which actually reduces the carbon footprint too, just like you were talking about that England had found. So, there's a lot of good reasons. It's not just about the stockpile in and of itself. It's about being able to have just-in-time manufacturing, be able to have shorter production and shipping times, so reducing the carbon footprint, and then just the capital investment that's actually tied up because you're actually reliant on another country to produce your product. So you're tying up a lot of capital where you could be bringing it back here for your local economies.
Do you think that the tariffs that have been put in place will help with that?
I think I could go both ways on this, right? I can look at it from a standpoint of I see how it can help and it can hurt. I think what we're trying to do is kind of force the hands to make an even playing field, right? And that's really the intent. Let's start the negotiation. But, in the past, China hasn't been so friendly to the United States. And, Canada can say what they want to say, but it hasn't been very friendly either. And it's really just like, here's the starting point. Let's start to have the conversation, and then we'll land somewhere in between, right? I think that we need to be reliant on one another at some level because we can't do it all. But at the same time, it's been so swayed one way for so long that the U.S. does need to kind of put their foot down.
Absolutely, I agree with that statement. So, how does the over reliance on importing PPE contribute to the waste problem?
Well, like I was talking about before, we, filled all these U.S. sites with a stockpile, right? In the case of any kind of natural disaster, pandemic, epidemic. And, we've had quite a few this year. We've had the fires in California. We had the hurricane in Asheville, North Carolina, which no one could have ever predicted. And again, that's the whole point of a stockpile, right? How do you predict when an epidemic, pandemic, or a natural disaster is going to happen?
I mean, you can't.
So you either underestimate those stockpiles or you overestimate those stockpiles. And we are, a country of kind of excess, right? So we always overestimate. And, like I said, in COVID, 3/4 of that PPE got thrown out because headbands were breaking, plasticizers were coming out of the elastics in it. You had nose bars, falling out of face masks. I mean, we were being asked to figure out how we could decontaminate masks so that somebody could wear them again. And we don't know what happens to those materials like polypropylene. They're single-use items. They're not supposed to be reused. And so all of that got landfilled right at the get-go. The other thing that was really bad too, and really good at the same time, so I could argue both sides of this fence too, is the EUA got put in place, right? So the Emergency Use Act by the FDA. And what did that allow people to do? Well, it allowed people to buy products from maybe not so honest people that either were cutting corners with quality, cutting corners with design controls, and actually following, what we're supposed to do when it comes to FDA guidance and ISO 13485 and design history files, and being able to show that we've verified, we validated, we ensured that our product was safe for use, all the quality standards that you have to pass through. So it allowed one thing, it allowed people to have some relief on one side of the fence, to have more products available to them. But that's only if you trust the source that you're buying them from. And then on the other side, it opened up the doors for, a lot of bad actors to enter into the space. And now we're playing this cleanup. So there's a lot of product that was bought and then never used because it just had to go straight to the landfill. I was called on and to be a consultant on many occasions for suppliers for hospitals and or other companies. And, a lot of times, and I'll say probably 75% of the time, I told them, this isn't up to par. It's not good enough and it won't protect you.
Right. Going off of that, with the tariffs in place, and like you said, you have to trust the source that you're buying this material from. Do you think counterfeit is going to come into play during all of this?
I think it already did, and I think you just have to be able to do your due diligence and ensure that, your suppliers that you're getting product from, you've done, your quality audits, you've done your QC audits, you've ensured that the paperwork is actually real and it's not fake. I saw a ton of people like carbon copy and 510Ks, for instance, and that's your certification for, class 1, class 2, class 3 medical devices, pre-market approvals. And then I saw some of my own paperwork, that companies had taken and or either taken screenshots of the boxes of the stuff we were making and claim it as their own. So yeah, there was a lot of that. And I think we have got to figure out how to do our due diligence moving forward.
Looping back, are there any specific materials used in medical PPE that are difficult to dispose of?
Yeah, pretty much all of it. And I say that from a material standpoint, and I also say it from what they're safeguarding against, right? So when they're clean or when they're fresh out of the box, polypropylene, which is, the base raw material of almost all of your non-wovens, whether it's spun fiber lace, or it's spun bond, meltable on spun bond, whether it's any kind of way that we could actually spin a web, if you will, that is really super hard to get rid of, right? It's a plastic at the end of the day, and it doesn't actually go away for really long period of time. And we treat that, right? So when I say that it expires, what really expires is the filtration ability of those materials to be able to do their job, because that's usually an after treatment that's done, or a treatment during the process. So those materials are hard to get rid of. And then you've got nitrile on the exam glove side, and you got polyisoprene on the surgical side. That's hard to get rid of too, because those are petrochemicals, right? So anything that's made with a petrochemical is not gonna disintegrate very fast or biodegrade very fast. It's going to take at least 100 years if you're not putting something in it to actually make it begin to degrade. And still, that's still 50 something years. And yeah, go ahead, try to incinerate it. Then you're adding to the emissions in the environment. So no real good solution there. Environment.
Okay, moving back to onshoring, how does Nephron Nitrile plan on practicing sustainability differently than other countries?
Good question. And this is something that we've spent a lot of time on, really trying to ensure not only in our manufacturing processes themselves, but then as our product goes out into the workforce and then, upon disposal. So let me take you back to on the manufacturing side. I've spent most of, my time working with products like I just talked about, polypropylene for nonwoven materials, and nitrile and natural rubber latex and polyisoprene, butyl. All of those polymers have been, within my wheelhouse for most of my career. And we've been looking for how do we actually kind of go the whole circle of life, right? I mean, how do we get all the way back to not just protecting ourselves, but protecting our environment and protecting those around us? And so at Nephron, glove manufacturing, number one, consumes a lot of water. A lot of water. When I'm talking about a lot of water, I mean you're running a glove operation that has 20 dual dipping lines that runs a 24/7 operation. You're talking about 6 million gallons of water a day. Yep. You're pulling it from a well, or you're pulling it from the river, bringing it into your system, and you're disposing of it right back. At the same time, how can we be a zero discharge facility, right? So we've got a big system out here that we're filtering all the water that goes within our system and utilizing it, consuming 100% of it and putting it right back into our process. So we're not pulling water from the environment and putting it back. And even if we did have to, we would put it back responsibly, right? And that could be something that we have to look at in the future. But as we exist right now, no, we're a zero discharge facility. So that's number one. Number two, we've been looking at advanced polymers, right, that actually tax the system less. So I'm talking about standard operating procedures for nitrile production, right? But when you start looking at polyurethane, you're actually consuming about a third of the water now. So we don't have to consume as much water. There's not as much leaching that has to go on the back end because we're not using petrochemicals. We're not emitting VOCs into the environment. So there's a lot of less on the back end, right? There's less leaching. There's vulcanization because there is none anymore. And so we're pulling all of those kind of bad processes out of our manufacturing and carbon footprint for our manufacturing facility. What does that do as far as our products going into public or into the healthcare system? Well, because we're not putting the bad actors in, we don't look at things like type 1 allergies from proteins because we don't make natural rubber latex, and type 4 contact sensitizers from products like nitrile and polyisoprene, which if you don't vulcanize the rubber completely, you leave those accelerators behind. And then thirdly, because we don't do those things, when we dispose of those products, we actually can put them into the landfill that becomes 3 natural resources for nitrogen back for the plant life, carbon dioxide, and water.
So are there any advancements in sustainable material or biodegradable PPE that further helps with the waste reduction?
Absolutely. And I've seen some really clever ideas from, spinning mushrooms, which actually seems really, really freaking cool to me, to, looking at other synthetic polymers like polyurethane that naturally, just because they're waterborne dispersions, they break down pretty easily within the environment.
That's so innovating. Great that Nephron Nitro gets to be a part of this, and you're leading the way for making a more sustainable planet. How does reducing the waste through onshoring impact the overall economy, from job creation to healthcare savings?
So I'm a big believer in AI, you know that. And I'm also a big believer in giving people opportunities in the workforce that make sense. And what do I mean by that? When we look at our job creation that we want to be able to do here, we want it to be meaningful, impactful jobs that can get people, not just a job, but a lifestyle, and be able to grow into those roles, and have a individual development plan that gives them a plan for success. And so AI is a big part of being able to do that for job creation, because what we can do is all those meaningless tasks that we had to do back in the day. Well, we built that into our robotic system, and we do a lot of predictive analytics so that the machines can be smarter than they used to be. And we haven't had to do a lot of this, because we've offshored for so long and labor's so cheap over there. We haven't had to actually look at this. And so this is an exciting time to be able to say, okay, now how do we give back to our workforce and give back to the people that come to work with us, and build that cultural environment that people want to come to work every day and are happy to do their job.
Right. I know a lot of people going into 2025, they're really worried about AI taking over all the jobs. I'm a firm believer that, AI is not going to take over the jobs, but it will take over the people that don't know how to use AI.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really excited to see how that pans out here at Nephron Nitrile, and where it goes.
It's almost like the job you do. Yeah, I spent so much time overseas for so long that it's like, as soon as you walk out the door, and you hop on a plane and you come back to the US, you don't know what happens. You don't know what's going on, and it's like, it's almost too late, because you've purchased, X amount of dollars of product, and then 28 days before it hits the shore in Long Beach. And then by the time it hits the shore, let's say FDA decides to come in and do an inspection, and you fail, pinhole testing or whatever. Now you're doing 100% inspection, and it's $40,000 a day, to do all that. Whereas if you were here in the States and it was controlled by you, as a manufacturer, it's the time sink, because that's a lot of time. You go over, you run your trial, you come back, 28 days, you got to wait for your shipment. I mean, it's months, versus just in time manufacturing. And I think that that's really what I was getting to earlier, was the leeway that you get with just in time manufacturing. And you gain so much from, the shorter distances and shelf life expectation, and all those things add up, when you start looking at a timeline. I think that that's really the big thing about that.
Wow, what an eye-opening conversation, Alison. And thank you for sharing your expertise and breaking down how onshoring PPE manufacturing isn't just about our supply chain. It's a real solution for medical waste. But here's the thing for our listeners. This movement doesn't happen without you. If today's conversation helped you in any way, or if you care about protecting our frontline workers and our planet, we need your voice in this conversation. Follow us to stay up to date on the latest episodes and insights. Head on over to our website and subscribe to join the She Shields America community. Together, we're shaping the future of PPE one hand at a time. And before we wrap things up, we have exciting news that we will be attending the Medical Device Conference in Austin, Texas, starting Saturday, February 15th, where Alison will be taking the stage as a speaker. So stay tuned for more details, and we hope to see you there. Until next time, stay protected, America.